This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nita Hone, and it is Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. This is a series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. In one of last week's MTG Top 10s, I looked at red 1-drops. Lots of people in the comments said they wanted to see the same for every color, and I want to see it too. I thought the most interesting place to start would be blue. Red is the most aggressive color in the game, and most of the 1-drops on that list were all about doing damage as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, blue is generally the least aggressive color in the game, so in theory at least, I figured that 1-drops would look considerably different here. Before we get to the list, let me remind you what I mean by 1-drop. It only applies to permanents. The term is used by some more broadly to mean converted mana costs, but for me they aren't the same, and Wizards uses it to only refer to permanents too, so that's what we're looking at here. In other words, you're not going to find Brainstorm or Ponder on this list because they aren't permanents. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A Pro Tour, Players Tour, or Mythic Championship top 8, as well as Legacy or Vintage Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix or Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. Now, let's get to number 10. At number 10, it is Hapless Researcher. Well, right off the bat, we are seeing a blue 1-drop that is most definitely not aggressive, at least not aggressive in the same sense that most red 1-drops were. In other words, the Researcher's main goal is not to do damage to the opponent. Instead, the Researcher can sacrifice itself to allow you to loot. That may not seem like a whole lot, but Hapless Researcher is a very nice 1-drop for Reanimator decks, which is where all 8 of its points come from, with 1 from Extended and 7 from Legacy. The Researcher can help you put a scary creature into your graveyard for you to bring back later in the game, and the fact that you don't necessarily have to pay mana the turn you do it means that you have more mana to use on your reanimation spell. Additionally, the fact that this guy can block early isn't irrelevant either, as sometimes reanimation decks really need to preserve their life total early, and having an actual 1-drop in your deck who can do that for you, while also helping you load up your graveyard, is pretty nice. At number 9, it's Hedren Crab, an even less aggressive creature than Hapless Researcher. At least the Researcher has 1 power instead of 0. Instead, the Crab has a powerful landfall ability that mills 3 cards every time you play a land. I know this will make some mill players in the comments mad, but Hedren Crab has never found success at the highest level in actual mill decks. Instead, where the Crab has really excelled is in decks where you use the Crab to mill yourself. So, like Hapless Researcher, the Crab can help you stock your graveyard, but it is much more of a graveyard-filling engine than Researcher is, who can only do it once, and only with a single card. Hedren Crab didn't see any play in Blocker Standard, which makes sense. Those formats don't tend to have powerful graveyard decks. The Crab gained its first points back in 2009, with all 4 of those points coming in Extended Dredge decks. These decks were entirely built around getting a bunch of cards in the graveyard and then getting tons of value out of them. This includes with things like Bloodghast and Narcomoeba. However, after that success in Extended in 2009, Hedren Crab went a full decade before getting some more points. Those points came in 2019, largely as a result of the printing of the super busted Hogak, who made Dredge decks in Modern and Legacy even more insane. The Crab could help you power out Hogak absurdly early. Hogak was eventually banned out of Modern, but he is still legal in Legacy. Given that the Crab already has 1 point there, we might see this guy move higher up on this list in the future. At number 8, it is Sidisi's Faithful, our second consecutive 1-drop with 0 power, so yeah, obviously another not-so-aggressive 1-drop. The Faithful was played in a couple of different places in Standard. The first of these was in the Rally the Ancestors combo deck, which was pretty much built around casting, Rally the Ancestors, and reanimating your entire graveyard. The Faithful fit quite nicely into the deck because you could use its exploit ability early to buy yourself some time, either sacrificing itself or something else to bounce one of your opponent's creatures, and then when you rallied later in the game, you could get that creature back along with the rest of the graveyard. The main plan of the deck involved Zulaport Cutthroat and sacrifice effects to end the game on the spot, and the Faithful helped you get there. Those rally decks also happen to run Collected Company, which could help you toolbox the Sidisi's Faithful into play at a particularly opportune time. The Faithful was also played in some Bant Collected Company decks as a result. So far, the Faithful hasn't gained any points in any formats outside of Standard, but Pioneer could prove potentially fruitful for it. At number 7, I actually have 3 cards: Mistcloaked Herald, Siren Stormtamer, and Curious Obsession. The Obsession is a legitimate number 7, while the Storm Tamer and Herald would have been at number 9. These are aggressive cards for blue, the first we've seen on this list, but why am I putting them together? Well, sometimes I look at 2 or 3 cards together because they are so functionally similar, and there is some of that here. Both creatures are 1 mana 1/1s with evasion. However, the real reason I chose to look at those two together in particular is because every single top 8 that has given points to Mistcloaked Herald came in a deck featuring Siren Storm Tamer, and obviously enough, vice versa. So these two not only have identical scores, they came from the exact same place. That place was mono blue aggro or mono blue tempo decks in Standard. One of the few non-Merfolk mono-blue aggro decks to have ever found consistent success, the deck was built around doing damage quickly with evasive creatures like these two. One of the big strategies of the deck was to put Curious Obsession on one of them, and then protect the creature as it damages the opponent and draws you tons of cards. So that's why I also put the Obsession here. However, unlike the creatures, Curious Obsession has gone on to success in Pioneer 2, where it's played in Izzet Wizards and Blue-White Spirits. It seems likely that, going forward, the Obsession will pull farther away from its standard running mates. At number 6, it's Spectral Sailor, another 1 mana 1/1 flyer. This card is somewhat aggressive, but it also likes to make it to the long game because at that point it has a pretty powerful mana sink ability that draws you cards. The Sailor didn't earn any points in Standard, but has gone on to find considerable success in Pioneer, where Spirit Tribal decks are one of the best decks around right now. These are decks loaded up with creatures with the Spirit Creature type, and several payoffs for that type as well. These decks are usually banned so they can run Collected Company. Even though Pioneer was only announced in October of 2019 and didn't receive its first premiere events until a couple of months later, the Sailor already has 12 points in the format, all of them coming in the first 3 months of 2020. Spectral Sailor seems like a good candidate to continue to climb up this list. At number 5, it is Minister of Inquiries, which is sort of an energy-centric version of Hedren Crab. Like the Crab, the Minister was largely used to mill its controller, not opposing players. Energy is a famously overpowered mechanic, and feeding this thing enough energy to mill a bunch of your library was surprisingly easy, especially because he comes with the ability to do it a couple of times all on his own. The Minister only has points in Standard, and they all came in God Pharaoh's Gift decks. Obviously, this was a graveyard-centric deck that sought to mill a bunch of creatures into the graveyard so that you can turn them into 4/4 zombie tokens with haste. That's a pretty crazy trigger if you can get something out of it every turn. What's more is, these decks also ran Gate to the Afterlife, which could put the gift into play from pretty much anywhere, provided you got enough cards into your graveyard, and, obviously, the Minister helps with that. The Minister is not quite as effective or consistent as the Hedren Crab at milling, and as a result, it has never seen play outside of Standard, and most likely, the Crab will be played before it in graveyard-centric decks and other formats. At number 4, it's Curse Catcher. While it doesn't have particularly aggressive stats, Curse Catcher is a pretty nice 1-drop to have around, since potentially countering instants or sorceries is no joke. It has largely been played in Merfolk tribal decks, gaining points in such decks in almost every format it has ever been legal in. These decks tend to be aggro decks, and the Curse Catcher is great because it slows the opponent down an entire turn from casting something like a board sweeper. Oftentimes all a Merfolk deck needs is one more turn to finish off an opponent. In addition to that, the Curse Catcher often gets bonuses from all the Merfolk lords the deck runs, and it can actually do a decent amount of damage before giving itself up for the cause. Merfolk decks have been pretty quiet in all formats since 2017, but they are usually on the fringes of a format like Modern, and surely they will get another top 8 at some point, and Curse Catcher, you have to believe, will be in that deck. At number 3, it is Mausoleum Wanderer, the second spirit to make the list. The Wanderer is basically a more impressive Curse Catcher who also turns out to be more aggressive. It is also a 1 mana 1/1 that can sacrifice itself to counter instants and sorceries, but on top of that, it has flying, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn every time you play a spirit, and it can sometimes make the opponent have to pay more than just a single mana to keep their spell from being countered. Curse Catcher might have the creature type that is more widely supported, especially when you factor in formats with larger card pools, but spirits have enough support that the Wanderer is finding itself some real success. Like Spectral Sailor, a fellow spirit that made this list, Mausoleum Wanderer does not have any points in Standard. However, he has seen considerable play in blue-white and banned spirit decks. Obviously, the Wanderer gets better the more spirits that are in your deck, and both Modern and Pioneer have enough other cards that are spirit payoffs that tribal spirit decks have found a lot of success lately. The Wanderer will likely continue to gain points, although it is pretty far behind the number 2 right now. And that number 2 is Cloudfin Raptor. The Raptor might be another blue 1-drop with 0 power, But unlike the others we saw, Cloudfin Raptor can increase its stats thanks to the evolved mechanic. The Raptor actually tends to be a very aggressive card as a result. The Raptor gained all of its points in Standard almost exclusively in devotion to blue decks. And at number 1, not surprising anybody, is Delvar of Secrets, which has a massive lead over everything else on this list. It's hard to imagine that it will ever relinquish its spot. We have seen that blue has a few aggressive 1-drops that have found success and ended up on this list, and Delvar of Secrets is another one of those, since it is so frequently just a 1-mana 3/2 with flying, which is insanely efficient. Some even consider the Delvar to be the best 1-drop in the entire game, and there is certainly a good argument for that based on its success. Now, the Delvar does ask you to play a bunch of instants and sorceries so that it can transform into Insectile Aberration, and as a result, the Delvar generally isn't played in more traditional aggro decks that are just jam-packed with creatures. Instead, it tends to be played in aggro control decks, which seek to win the game using nice, efficient creatures like the Delvar, but also pack a bunch of spells like Counter Magic to protect it. Delvar decks have found success in every format it has been legal in, and it's going to continue to extend its lead over other cards on this list in the coming years. So in the end, blue may not have as many aggressive 1-drops as red, but about half of this list were highly efficient creatures whose main purpose is to attack the opponent. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to catch up on the MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.